He spent my whole life telling me I wasn't good enough. The day the judge asked for my credentials, I handed him my service record and watched my father's face collapse. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about what happens when the daughter you ignored holds all the power. By the time they swore me in, he couldn't even look at me. Not in the eyes. The truth doesn't care about blood. And justice doesn't care about rank. The auditorium was packed, rows of crisp dress uniforms, polished shoes, the low hum of murmured conversations. The Pentagon's Hall of Heroes was reserved for ceremonies like this, the kind where careers were immortalized in brass and ribbon. I adjusted my collar, my fingers brushing the new weight on my chest, the Legion of Merit, a medal I'd earned through 2 years of sleepless nights, intercepted threats, and missions I still couldn't talk about. Hey, beautiful soul. Before we dive in, show some love with a like, tap subscribe, and tell me, where in this big, beautiful world are you watching from? The announcer's voice boomed. Captain Elara Voss, for exceptional service in counterintelligence operations safeguarding national security. Applause erupted. I stood, my posture flawless, my face neutral. But my eyes flickered to the front row, to the seat my mother had RSVP'd for. Empty. Again. I forced a smile as I shook the general's hand, accepted the folded citation. The weight of the medal was nothing compared to the familiar, hollow ache in my ribs. He promised this time. After the ceremony, a lieutenant clapped me on the shoulder. Your dad must be proud. Where is he? I didn't flinch. Couldn't make it. Damn, that's rough. Family emergency. I almost laughed. Yeah. An emergency of priorities. I'd learned early that my father had 2 categories for people, those who mattered and those who didn't. My brother? A little league home run was worth canceling meetings. My cousin's mediocre law school graduation? Front row seats. But my West Point commissioning? I've seen enough ceremonies. My first deployment return? You're not special, soldiers come home every day. This award, the highest honor of my career, had been different though. My mother had called last week, hesitant. He said he'll be there, Elara. He put it in his calendar. I hadn't believed her. But some stupid, stubborn part of me had still hoped. Back in my office, I tossed the citation onto my desk. My phone buzzed. Ava. Tell me he didn't. I didn't answer. 3 dots pulsed. Then, I just called Mom. He went golfing with the damn senator from Texas. Of course he had. Senator Ryland was on the Armed Forces Committee. A useful connection. I stared at the medal. The irony was almost funny. I'd spent my career unraveling lies, exposing betrayals. Yet I'd kept believing over and over that this time would be different. That's when it hit me. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a file, thick, classified, tied with red tape. Inside were months of quiet research, flagged contracts, suspicious payments. All linked to one name, Colonel Darius Voss. I traced the edges of the papers. For years, I'd told myself his absence didn't matter, that I didn't need his approval. But today, staring at that empty chair, I realized something else. I didn't need his approval, but he needed mine. And soon, he'd know it. The smell of charred burgers and sunscreen hung thick in the air as I pulled into my parents' driveway. I'd just flown in from a 6-month deployment, my uniform still crisp, my duffel bag heavy with souvenirs for my nieces. The backyard was packed with relatives, the kind of gathering my father loved, an audience. I spotted him by the grill, holding court with my uncles, a beer in one hand and a spatula in the other. Colonel Darius Voss, retired but never off duty. His laugh boomed across the lawn as I approached. Dad, I said. He turned, and for a split second, his smile faltered. Not with surprise. With something else, annoyance? Elara. You made it. Like I'd shown up uninvited. Before I could respond, my brother, Jason, clapped me on the back. Hey, Captain America. How's the spy life? He grinned, but there was an edge to it. The same one he'd had since we were kids, when Dad started calling him the heir and me asterisk, the experiment. Asterisk. I forced a laugh. Classified. My father snorted. She's not a spy. She pushes paperwork in a basement. The uncles chuckled. My grip tightened around the bottle in my hand. Then, from the porch, my mother's voice. Darius, the cake's ready. That's when I saw it, the sheet cake on the picnic table. Congratulations, Jason, scrawled in blue icing. Jason had just finished a certificate program in business management. A 6-week course. I stared at the cake. Then at my father. What's this for? He didn't even look up from the grill. Jason finished his program. First in his class. I'd been literally first in my class at West Point. Dad had missed graduation for a golf tournament. Aunt Carol squeezed my arm. We're so proud of you too, Elara. Your mother told us about your promotion. My father flipped a burger. Promotions are automatic if you don't screw up. The air left my lungs. Then Ava. My little sister slammed her drink down on the table. That's bullshit, Dad. Elara got commended for her intel work. Jason got a gold star for showing up to Zoom class in his pajamas. Silence. My father's face darkened. Watch your tone. Ava didn't back down. Or what? You'll ignore me too. The uncles shifted uncomfortably. Jason looked at his shoes. My mother's smile was frozen in place. And my father? He turned back to the grill. Elara knows what she signed up for. The military doesn't give trophies for participation. The message was clear. Asterisk, you're not special. You never will be. Asterisk. I set my unopened beer on the table. I forgot something in the car. I walked away, their laughter resuming behind me. In the driveway, I yanked my phone out and pulled up my email. There it was, the message from Major Mercer, sent that morning. Voss, we need to talk. Your father's name came up in something interesting. Asterisk. I looked back at the house, at the smoke rising from the grill. Fine. Let him have his audience. Asterisk. I had work to do. The sound of cicadas buzzed in my ears as I stood on the high school football field, my blue graduation gown sticking to my skin in the June heat. I scanned the bleachers for the 100th time, my stomach twisting tighter with every empty second. He promised. Asterisk. 2 weeks ago, over meatloaf at the kitchen table, my father had actually looked up from his newspaper when I mentioned graduation. June 12th? I'll be there. Simple. Direct. No sarcasm, no backhanded remark. Just a statement of fact. I'd let myself believe him. Elara Voss, the principal, called. I walked across the stage, my smile feeling brittle under the weight of all those eyes. The applause was polite, but all I could hear was the silence where his voice should have been. After the ceremony, I found my mother waiting by the car alone, her eyes red-rimmed behind oversized sunglasses. Where's Dad? She adjusted her purse strap. Jason's team made the playoffs. The game got rescheduled for today and what? He couldn't miss Little League. My voice cracked. I was valedictorian. Team captain. Full ROTC scholarship to college. None of it mattered. My mother reached for me, then stopped herself. He said you'd understand. That's when I saw it, the folded program in her hand with Jason Voss #12 scribbled on the back in my father's familiar block letters. He'd been there. Just not for me. The car ride home was silent except for the radio playing some country song about proud fathers. When we pulled into the driveway, I could hear the celebration through the screen door, my father's booming laugh, Jason bragging about his double. I walked in to see them at the kitchen table, Jason still in his uniform, my father's arm around his shoulders. The remains of a victory cake sat between them. My father looked up. Oh good, you're back. Help your brother with his gear. That night, as I packed for basic training, I found the graduation card my mother had left on my bed. Inside, in her looping script, we're so proud of you. We, asterisk. I tore the card in half. The Christmas lights twinkled mockingly from the mantel as I stood frozen in my father's study, the email chain glowing on his desktop screen. I'd only come in here to grab a spare charger, but the open inbox had stopped me dead. Subject, Elara's service, asterisk. From Darius.Voss@army.mil asterisk. To James Ryland at Senate. Gov asterisk. Date November 12, 2020 asterisk. Jim, don't let the uniform fool you. My daughter's intelligence work consists of filing reports in a SCF. The military's soft these days, handing out promotions like participation trophies. If she were a man, they'd have cut her loose after the first deployment. PS still on for golf Sunday? I'll bring the scotch, asterisk. My hand shook. The date was 3 weeks after I'd returned from Afghanistan, after I'd spent 6 months embedded with local forces, after 2 of my teammates came home in coffins. The door creaked open behind me. Looking for something? Ava stood in the doorway, holding 2 glasses of eggnog. I pointed at the screen. Did you know about this? She set the glasses down hard. Oh my God. Ava started clicking through more emails with the efficiency of a woman who'd been covering my back since we shared a childhood bedroom. What we found was worse than I imagined. A 2017 message to his veterans group. Elara only got into West Point because of affirmative action. A 2019 reply to my CO's LinkedIn post about my promotion. She's better at politics than soldiering. Dozens of exchanges with Senator Ryland dismissing my career as desk duty. The final email made my blood turn to ice. From Darius.Voss at army.mil asterisk. To Jason.Voss@gmail.com asterisk. Subject, your sister's sacrifice asterisk. Jason, when Elara quits the army, and she will, don't let her play the victim. She chose this path to spite me, not serve. Real soldiers don't need constant validation, asterisk. Ava's nails dug into my arm. He's been sabotaging you this whole time. Downstairs, laughter erupted from the living room. My father's voice carried up the stairs, regaling relatives with some war story from Desert Storm, the same one where he'd single-handedly secured an airfield, a claim his old CO later told me was 80% bullshit. I took a photo of the emails with my phone. Then another. And another. What are you going to do? Ava whispered. Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing my father's perfectly manicured lawn, the lawn he'd made Jason mow every Saturday while I was off playing soldier. I handed Ava her untouched eggnog. Merry Christmas. The glass shattered against the wall just as our father's footsteps sounded on the stairs. The flight back to base the next morning was the quietest 3 hours of my life. I stared out the window at the clouds, my father's words burning behind my eyelids. If she were a man, they'd have cut her loose. The emails weren't just insults, they were ammunition. My father had spent years poisoning my reputation with people who mattered. Senators, veterans groups, my own brother. The plane touched down, and I walked straight to Major Mercer's office without stopping to change out of my civilian clothes. He took one look at my face and closed the door. Voss. I dropped my phone on his desk, the email chain glowing on the screen. I need your help. Mercer read in silence. His jaw tightened when he got to the Afghanistan part. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. You want to file a complaint? I shook my head. I want receipts. For the first time in our 5-year working relationship, Mercer smiled. Mercer introduced me to Lieutenant Chen from Cyber Command. Within hours, we'd subpoenaed my father's military email archives, every disparaging comment, every lie about my service. Chen whistled. Your old man's got a real hobby, doesn't he? I started compiling every performance review, every commendation letter, every mission report with sensitive details redacted. The thicker it grew, the calmer I became. When my mother called to ask why I'd missed Jason's wedding, I sent a bouquet and a note. Duty calls. No explanation. No drama. 6 months later, my father showed up at base unannounced. I found him waiting outside the commissary in his old dress blues, his colonel's insignia polished to a shine. Elara. I kept walking. He grabbed my arm. You're really not going to speak to me? I looked at his hand until he let go. Is there something you need, Colonel? His face darkened. This childish grudge ends now. The Ryland nomination hearing is next week, and, there it was. Senator Ryland was up for Secretary of Defense. My father needed his golden ticket. I adjusted my cap. I have a briefing in 10 minutes. As I walked away, I heard him snap, "You'd be nothing without my name." I didn't turn around. The military investigation into my father began quietly, just a routine audit of retired officers' consulting work. At least, that's what the paperwork said. I sat in a secure conference room at the Pentagon, watching Major Mercer slide a classified folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, contract bids, and damningly familiar signatures. "Your father's been brokering arms deals with defense contractors," Mercer said, tapping a payment ledger. "Using his old unit's connections. Pocketing 7 figures in consulting fees." The numbers blurred. The dates lined up perfectly. Every time my father had mocked my paper-pushing job, he'd been funneling classified procurement intel to private firms. Chin handed me a flash drive. "We pulled his encrypted texts. He's been selling your deployments too." My stomach dropped. The drive contained screenshots of my father bragging to contractors. "My daughter's unit is heading to Kuwait next month. Perfect time to bid on base security contracts." He'd monetized my service while dismissing it. Mercer had me accidentally mention a fake deployment during a family Skype call. Within 72 hours, a shell company linked to my father placed suspicious equipment bids. The Army Criminal Investigation Command set up a sting, using me as the unknowing pawn until Mercer brought me in. "You've got the right to walk away," he said. I looked at the recording equipment. "When do we start?" I dialed my father's private line, voice steady. "Dad, I need advice. We're being deployed to guard a new weapon shipment in Poland." His pause lasted 3 seconds too long. "Interesting. What systems are they moving?" I closed my eyes. Gotcha. As JAG officers built their case, I realized the cruel joke. My father was going down for the very thing he'd accused me of, playing soldier while others did real work, except his fraud put lives at risk. My desk job had caught him. The night before the indictment dropped, Mercer found me reviewing interrogation transcripts. "You don't have to testify," he said. I slid the file back into its folder. "Yes, I do." The military prosecutor assigned to my father's case was a steely-eyed JAG captain named Rachel Nguyen. When we first met in her office, she pushed a thick dossier toward me without ceremony. "Your father's defense claims this is a misunderstanding between old comrades. That you're a resentful daughter exaggerating family drama into federal charges." She studied my reaction. "I need to know if that's true." I opened the file to find photos of Syrian warehouses stocked with American-made rifles, serial numbers matching contracts my father had brokered. "Do I look resentful?" I asked quietly. Nguyen's smile was razor-thin. "Not yet." She revealed the case's linchpin. My father's former logistics sergeant, now running a Dubai import business, had flipped. "He's prepared to testify your father altered shipment manifests. Diverted gear to warlords." My coffee turned to acid in my throat. All those years dismissing my service while he'd been arming the enemy we fought. The next week, Nguyen staged a rehearsal in an empty courtroom. When she played the recording of my Poland call, my father's voice filled the chamber, that familiar mix of condescension and greed. "What systems are they moving?" The JAG stenographer actually gasped. Nguyen paused the tape. "That's treason, Captain Voss. Do you understand now why we can't let this be about family?" I did. This was bigger than empty graduation seats or snide remarks at barbecues. My father had traded secrets while my teammates bled out in the sand. That night, I dreamt of my first deployment, holding a dying corporal's hand as he whispered, "Tell my dad I tried." I woke up clutching my dog tags, realizing with cold clarity, my father would have sold that boy's body armor for profit. At dawn, Nguyen called with urgent news. Senator Ryland was pressuring the Pentagon to drop the case. "They're calling it a witch hunt against decorated veterans." Her voice hardened. "We need your testimony tomorrow. No more rehearsals." I dressed carefully that morning, every ribbon, every badge polished to a mirror shine. The last thing I pinned on was the Legion of Merit from the ceremony my father missed. Let him see what participation trophies looked like. As I closed my locker, my phone buzzed. "Ava, he just told Mom you're lying to get promoted." I smiled for the first time in weeks. Good. Let him underestimate me one last time. The courthouse steps swarmed with reporters. Through the chaos, I spotted my father surrounded by his lawyers, still playing the war hero. Our eyes met across the plaza. For a fleeting moment, I saw it, the flicker of doubt. The realization that his greatest mistake wasn't stealing secrets, but assuming the daughter he'd ignored would stay silent. Then the moment passed, and he turned away with that familiar, dismissive shrug. Fine. Let him walk in confident. The explosion always comes louder when they never hear the fuse. The courtroom air hummed with tension as I took the witness stand. The gallery was packed, JAG officers in the front rows, reporters scribbling in the back, and my father's golf buddies sweating through their dress blues. But my focus narrowed to one man. Colonel Darius Voss, sitting at the defense table with his spine rigid, as if sheer military bearing could ward off the truth. Gwyn approached with the calm of a sniper settling into position. Captain Voss, how many combat deployments have you served? 3. And your current role? Deputy Lead for Counterintelligence Operations in the 307th Military Intelligence Battalion. She paused, letting the titles sink in. Then she handed me a document. Do you recognize this? It was my father's email to Senator Ryland, the one calling my service, paper pushing. The words blurred for a second. I took a breath. Yes. Gwyn projected it onto the courtroom screens. Would you read the date for the jury? November 12th, 2020. And where were you stationed at that time? Forward Operating Base Ghazni, Afghanistan. A juror's pen clattered to the floor. Gwyn let the silence stretch before playing the recording. My father's voice slithered through the speakers. Asterisk, what systems are they moving? Asterisk. I watched his face as he heard his own greed laid bare. The color drained from his cheeks, his fingers twitching against the table. For the first time in my life, Darius Voss looked small. Then came the coup de grace. Gwyn produced shipment manifests, side by side with my father's bank deposits. Captain, can you explain these transactions dated 2 days after your Poland call? I studied the numbers, the damning trail of zeros. These matched the payments from Atlas Defense, a contractor bidding on Polish-based security. My father's lawyer shot up. Objection. Speculation. The judge peered at me. Captain. I met my father's eyes. I know because I reviewed Atlas's bid package last month. Their equipment lists matched our classified specs word for word. The gallery erupted. The judge's gavel cracked like a gunshot. And my father? He didn't look at me. He stared at his hands, suddenly fascinated by his wedding band. Gwyn saved her final question for last. Captain, why come forward now? The answer came without thought. Because the army taught me something my father never did. Loyalty isn't about blood. It's about doing what's right. As I stepped down, I didn't glance at the man who'd spent a lifetime diminishing me. I already knew what I'd see. The crumbling mask of a man who'd mistaken silence for weakness. The verdict came 3 days later. Guilty on all counts. I wasn't in the courtroom to hear it. I was back at Ghazni, drinking bad coffee with my team, finally free of the weight I'd carried since that empty graduation seat. Let history remember Darius Voss as the traitor. They'd remember me as the soldier who stopped him. The morning after the verdict, I woke before dawn to the sound of boots crunching gravel outside my tent in Ghazni. A corporal handed me a secure tablet with a live feed from CNN, my father being led away in handcuffs, his uniform stripped of rank. The cheer-in read, asterisk, decorated colonel sentenced for selling secrets. Asterisk, I closed the feed without watching the full clip. Some endings don't deserve ceremony. Back home, the fallout spread like wildfire. Senator Ryland resigned after investigators found his name on 3 of my father's offshore transfers. My brother Jason left a voicemail, asterisk, how could you do this to family? Asterisk, before changing his number. Only Ava stood firm, sending me daily texts with courtroom sketches captioned, Popsicle the prison bitch, until I finally laughed. But the real surprise came from Fort Meade. A sealed envelope arrived with my new orders, promotion to major and command of my own intelligence unit. No fanfare, no speech, just a sticky note from Mercer. Asterisk, told you paperwork wins wars. Asterisk, I pinned the oak leaves to my collar that night alone in my quarters, the weight unfamiliar but right. 3 weeks later, I stood at Arlington watching snow dust the graves of teammates lost in Syria, teammates whose last moments had been monetized in my father's spreadsheets. A shadow fell beside me, Major Gwyn in civilian clothes, holding 2 coffees. "Heard you got Ryland too," she said, handing me a cup. We drank in silence until she nodded at the headstones. They'd be proud. I thought of the corporal who died whispering about his dad, of the weapons that might have killed him ending up in my father's ledger. "Not as proud as I am of them," I said. The media storm raged for months. Op-eds painted me as everything from a hero to a traitor to her own blood. I ignored them all until the day a 60 Minutes producer showed up at my base with a release form. "Your story could inspire thousands of women in service," she urged. I declined with the same line I'd given the JAG investigators. The mission speaks for itself. My mother sent one letter, not an apology, but a clipping from my 5th grade play where I'd portrayed Abigail Adams. She'd circled my line. Remember the ladies. No signature. I burned it in a steel drum behind the motor pool, watching the embers dissolve into the same Afghan wind that had carried away so much. At month's end, my new unit gathered for their first briefing. Fresh faces, sharp salutes, not a single question about my last name. When a lieutenant referred to me as "ma'am," without hesitation, something unclenched in my chest. After the meeting, a young sergeant lingered. "Major Voss? My niece joined ROTC because of you." She held out a folded drawing, a stick figure girl in an oversized helmet labeled Captain Voss. I framed it beside my promotion orders. The final reckoning came on a Tuesday. My father, from prison, requested a visitor. I went not as a daughter, but as his case officer, regulation dress blues. No medals except my Legion of Merit. The glass between us might as well have been the Potomac. He spoke first. "You think you won?" I studied the hollows under his eyes, the tremor in his once steady hands. "I stopped keeping score when they handcuffed you, Colonel." He flinched at the rank, his old title stripped of my before it. As guards led him away, he turned for a final look. I saluted, not to the man but to the justice system that had finally, blessedly, treated us as equals. Back at base, I tore up the visitor log and threw a football with my analysts in the fading light. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of empty chairs. The next morning's briefing would bring new threats, new missions, a world far removed from a little girl scanning bleachers for a father who never came. Let him fade into prison obscurity. I had a country to protect. The transfer orders came through on a rain-slicked Thursday morning, 6 months after my father began his 12-year sentence at Fort Leavenworth. I was to take command of the 10th Intelligence Battalion in Stuttgart, a unit specializing in counterterrorism operations across North Africa. The assignment memo included an unusual postscript, per General Whitcomb's instruction, you're to conduct no further interviews regarding the Voss case. I initialed the form without comment. Some ghosts are best left buried. My last night at Meade, Mercer showed up at my quarters with a bottle of single malt and 2 glasses. We drank in silence until he slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were photos of my father's prison intake, mugshot, fingerprints, the hollow stare of a man who'd spent his life measuring worth in stars and salutes only to lose both. The final image stopped me cold. A scan of his commissary account, showing a $20 deposit from Lillian Voss every month. Mercer studied my face. "You didn't know." I pushed the photos away. "She visits. Every 3rd Sunday. Sits for the full 2 hours even though he refuses to see her." The ice in my glass cracked as I took a long swallow. My mother, the eternal enabler, still chasing the approval she'd never gotten either. Mercer stood to leave, pausing at the door. "For what it's worth, the 10th is lucky to have you." He tossed me a challenge coin, the kind special ops teams carry. On one side, the CIA seal. On the other, engraved, "The truth needs no bodyguard." Stuttgart welcomed me with drizzling rain and a stack of classified briefs taller than my coffee mug. My new executive officer, a whip-smart captain named Ruiz, had lined up the full battalion for inspection. As I walked the ranks, a sergeant major barked, asterisk, battalion, attention. Asterisk, 200 soldiers snapped to no whispers, no sideways glances. Just crisp salutes for their new commander. That afternoon, while reviewing personnel files, I found a familiar name. Corporal Emily Park, the niece of my sergeant back at Meade. Her application essay cited my Senate testimony as inspiration. Ruiz saw me pause. Problem, ma'am? I closed the file. Just remembering where we come from matters. The call came at 0300. A high-value target in Mali, the weapons trafficker we'd been tracking for months, had been spotted at a safe house. As I authorized the drone surveillance, satellite images revealed something unexpected. Crates of American-made M4S with serial numbers matching my father's diverted shipments. The circle had come full, his corruption now my mission to clean up. We took the compound at dawn. When interrogators flashed the trafficker photos of my father, he laughed. Asterisk, the old colonel? He was just the middleman. Asterisk, the revelation sparked a year-long operation that dismantled 3 arms networks across the Sahel. Each successful raid felt like reclaiming a piece of something stolen, not just weapons, but honor. Ava visited that Christmas, smuggling in homemade tamales and a stack of letters from our mother. I let them gather dust on my desk until New Year's Eve, when a snowstorm trapped me in the office. The top envelope contained no letter, just my West Point acceptance photo with my father's handwriting on the back, asterisk over my dead body. Asterisk beneath it, in my mother's shaky script, asterisk, I should have burned this years ago. Asterisk. I fed it to the shredder, then walked into the crisp German night. The base glowed under streetlights, the sound of distant laughter drifting from the enlisted club. Somewhere beyond those walls, my father stared at a concrete ceiling. Somewhere in Maryland, my mother waited for a visit that would never come. And here I stood, breath fogging in the cold, alive to the hum of a world that kept turning. The next morning, I pinned Corporal Park's re-enlistment commendation to her uniform. As she saluted, her eyes shone with the fierce pride of someone who'd found her place. I knew that look. It had taken me 32 years to earn it myself. Carry on, Corporal, I said, returning the salute. Some legacies aren't inherited. They're built. The first time a cadet asked me about my father, I didn't flinch. She was a 19-year-old West Point plebe with sharp eyes and a posture that screamed asterisk, I have something to prove. They'd assigned her to shadow me during summer training, a new mentorship program for young women in combat arms. Over MREs in the field, she hesitated before asking the question everyone wondered, but no one dared voice. Asterisk, ma'am, is it true? About Colonel Voss. Asterisk. I unscrewed my canteen and took a slow sip. Around us, the Georgia pines whispered in the heat. Asterisk, which part? That he sold secrets? That he missed my graduation? Or that I put him in prison? Asterisk. The cadet Larson, her name tag read, froze. I didn't mean. Here. Asterisk, I pulled a folded sheet from my cargo pocket and handed it to her. My father's sentencing report, creased from use. Asterisk, read the highlighted parts. Asterisk. She scanned the document, lips moving slightly. Then stopped at the section I'd marked the judge's words. Asterisk, a betrayal not just of country, but of every soldier who bleeds for it. Asterisk. This wasn't my shame to carry, asterisk, I said, taking the paper back. Asterisk, and it's not yours either. Asterisk. Larson blinked hard. Asterisk, my dad says women don't belong in infantry. Asterisk. I snapped my canteen shut. Asterisk, funny. Mine said the same thing. Now I outrank him by 2 pay grades. Asterisk. The laughter that burst from her was startled, bright. A sound I remembered making once, the day Mercer handed me my father's indictment. Later that month, I stood before 60 cadets in a lecture hall. The topic, ethical leadership in combat. My PowerPoint opened with a slide of my father's mugshot beside my promotion photo. The room went dead silent. Captain Voss, asterisk, a male cadet raised his hand. Asterisk, isn't this personal? Asterisk. I clicked to the next slide. A map of Mali with red XS marking where we'd recovered my father's stolen weapons. Asterisk, everything in war is personal. The trick is turning your anger into something useful. Asterisk. I told them about the Syrian warehouse we'd raided, about the M4S with serial numbers matching my father's manifests, about the Afghan child we'd found hiding in the rubble. Alive because we'd intercepted a mortar shipment he'd brokered. Your pain has mileage, asterisk, I said. Asterisk, drive it somewhere that matters. Asterisk. Afterward, Larson waited until the room cleared. Asterisk, ma'am, thank you. Asterisk, she handed me a folded note. Inside, a single line, asterisk, I want to be you when I grow up. Asterisk. I tucked it into my wallet, next to Ava's last text. Asterisk, Pops got shivved in the showers. Just a flesh wound. Karma's a bitch. Asterisk. That night, I sat in my quarters with a bourbon and my father's service record, the unredacted version, stamped confidential in angry red letters, page after page of commendations and corrections. The silver star he'd claimed for valor? Downgraded to a bronze. The enemy stronghold he'd single-handedly secured? A deserted outpost already cleared by Marines. I used my lighter to burn the edges, watching the lies curl to ash. Then I pinned the remains to my bulletin board beside Larson's note. A reminder, some legacies aren't inherited. They're overwritten. The prison transfer notice arrived on a Tuesday, slipped between routine deployment orders and a memo about updated PT standards. I almost missed it, just another piece of bureaucratic paperwork until the name caught my eye. Inmate hashtag 28746-083, Voss, Darius. Relocated to ADX Florence, effective immediately. I set the paper aside and finished signing off on the week's training schedules. Outside my office window, Larson and her squad ran drills in the morning heat, their boots kicking up red Georgia dust. One of the privates stumbled, and Larson yanked her up by the vest, shouting something that made the whole team laugh. My phone buzzed. Ava. Asterisk, they're moving Pops to Supermax. Mom's losing her shit. Call her. Asterisk. I typed a single reply. Asterisk, no. Asterisk. The printer hummed as it spat out the next batch of range qualifications. I pulled the warm papers free, the ink still smelling sharp. At the bottom of the stack was Larson's marksmanship report, top of her class. I scrawled outstanding work, cadet, across the top and left it on her bunk with a box of her favorite ammo. That evening, I walked the perimeter fence as the sun bled into the horizon. Somewhere in Colorado, my father was being processed into a cell where he'd spend 23 hours a day alone. No audience. No uniform. No one left to manipulate. Back at my desk, I shredded the transfer notice without reading the rest. The scraps fluttered into the bin like falling leaves. The next morning, Larson found me at the range. Heard you're TDY to Germany next month, she said, squinting down her sights. I adjusted her grip on the rifle. Asterisk, rotational deployment. You're coming with me. Asterisk. Her shot rang out, dead center. Asterisk, hell yes. Asterisk. Somewhere far away, a man who shared my DNA stared at concrete walls. And here, under the wide-open sky, a soldier who mattered took her next shot. The invitation arrived in a heavy cream envelope, embossed with the Department of Defense seal. Annual Valor Awards Ceremony, honoring distinguished service. My name appeared under this special recognition category. No explanation. No fanfare. Just a date, time, and dress code, service dress uniform with medals. I nearly recycled it with the mess hall menus until Ruiz caught me. You're not seriously skipping this? He held up the invite like a winning poker hand. They're giving Whitcomb the Lifetime Achievement Award. You know, the general who tried to bury your father's case. The range outside my window echoed with gunfire as Larson's platoon ran drills. The rhythmic pop-pop-pause of controlled pairs mixed with her sharp corrections. Sight picture, Jenkins. You're anticipating. I took the invitation back. What time's the ceremony? Ruiz grinned. The Pentagon Auditorium smelled like floor wax and ambition. Rows of generals and senators murmured as I took my seat beside Major Nguyen, now sporting a silver oak leaf on her collar. She nodded at my chest. You're missing something. I glanced down at my ribbons. What? Before she could answer, the announcer called my name. The stage lights burned hotter than I remembered. General Whitcomb stood frozen at the podium, his prepared speech about military values crumpling in his grip as I approached. The Secretary of Defense, not some junior aide, waited with a shadow box. Inside lay not another medal, but my father's confiscated colonel's eagles, mounted beside a plaque, to the officer who proved rank isn't earned by stars, but by sacrifice. The silence lasted 3 heartbeats. Then Gwyn started clapping. One by one, the junior officers joined, first a trickle, then a wave, until even Whitcomb's reluctant palms touched. Backstage, a JAG captain handed me a file. From the warden at Florence. Inside were commissary receipts showing my father had spent his last $20 ordering a newspaper, the one covering my Molly weapons bust. The purchase date, the day after my CNN interview. Gwyn stole the file and tossed it in a shredder. Still giving him rent-free space in your head? Outside, Larson waited by a Humvee with 2 coffees, her new sergeant stripes gleaming. I left the shadow box on a bench. Let some janitor take it home. The next morning's briefing brought fresh intel, a new arms network forming in Burkina Faso. As I pinned locations to the map, Larson slid a newspaper across the table. Today's edition, folded to show my ceremony photo. Someone had circled my face in red pen. I fed it to the shredder and tapped the map. Let's talk insertion points. Somewhere in Colorado, a broken man stared at newsprint. And here, in a room buzzing with purpose, soldiers waited for my orders. The past could keep its ghosts. We had work to do. The sandstorm rolled across the Ouagadougou airfield like a biblical plague as our C-130 touched down. Larson gripped her rifle tighter as the plane shuddered, not from fear, but anticipation. This was her first combat deployment since making sergeant, and she'd spent the flight memorizing every detail of the arms network we were hunting. The same one that had sprung up like a weed after we dismantled my father's operation in Mali. Inside the dimly lit Tactical Operations Center, a young Burkinabe intelligence officer spread satellite photos across the table. The weapons move tonight, he said in careful French. His finger landed on a grainy image showing trucks loaded with crates. American M4S, if the shadows told the truth. My father's ghosts coming full circle. I assigned Larson to lead the surveillance team. She didn't smile at the responsibility, just nodded and began checking her night vision gear with methodical precision. The kind of focus I remembered from my first tour. The kind that keeps you alive. We moved out at 2,300 hours, the desert air still oven hot. From our ridge position, we watched the convoy arrive through green-tinted lenses. The same patterns, the same handoffs as my father's operations. But these men were younger, hungrier. Amateurs playing at my father's game. Larson's whisper crackled in my earpiece. Confirm visual on primary target. Through my scope, I saw him, a wiry man in mirrored sunglasses despite the darkness. Colonel Voss's old liaison from Algiers. The one who'd vanished after the trial. The takedown was textbook. No fanfare, no grandstanding. Just flashbangs and precise violence. When we breached the warehouse, the crates bore familiar markings, lot numbers matching my father's stolen shipment manifests. Larson kicked one open with her boot. Same serials as Molly. Back at base, the interrogation yielded gold. The liaison cracked within hours, giving up 3 more networks across Niger and Chad. As the sun rose, I compiled the report with tired eyes. Larson slumped asleep in a chair beside me, her fingers still curled around an unsipped coffee. A notification popped up on my secure terminal, a message from the prison system. Inmate #28746-083 had requested a visitor. Again. I deleted it without opening the full text. Larson stirred as my chair scraped back. We done here, Major? I handed her the finished report. You are. Go rack out. I've got one more thing to do. Alone in the communications tent, I composed a message to the Pentagon's Inspector General. Attached every shred of evidence linking these new networks to my father's old contacts. Not for revenge. For closure. The reply came faster than expected. Investigation reopened. All connections will be pursued. Simple. Clinical. Final. Outside, the desert sun baked away the night's violence. Larson emerged from her tent, squinting against the light. What now? I tossed her the car keys. Now we go home. Somewhere behind us, in the dark warehouse we'd raided, a single crate remained unopened. Inside, beneath the rifles, lay a ledger with my father's initials. I'd seen it, and left it for the investigators. Let the dead bury their dead. The living had missions to run. The promotion ceremony took place at dawn on the Stuttgart parade ground, the morning mist clinging to the grass like gauze. Larson stood ramrod straight in her freshly pressed uniform, the gold lieutenant's bars gleaming in my palm. Around us, the battalion waited in formation, their breath visible in the crisp air. I didn't give a speech. No one expected one. The words that mattered had already been spoken in briefing rooms on ranges during midnight stakeouts in Ouagadougou. Instead, I simply pinned the bars to her collar, my knuckles brushing the scar on her jaw from our last firefight. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I saw myself 12 years younger, the hungry cadet who'd needed someone to believe in her before she could believe in herself. Don't screw it up, Lieutenant. The corners of her mouth twitched. Wasn't planning to, sir. As the battalion cheered, I reached into my pocket and pressed Mercer's challenge coin into her hand, the one engraved with the truth needs no bodyguard. Her fingers closed around it without looking. She already knew what it was. Later, in my office, I found the shadow box from the Pentagon ceremony leaning against my chair. Someone, probably Ruiz, had salvaged it from the trash. Inside, my father's eagles now shared space with a new addition, Larson's cadet patch from West Point, the one she'd given me after her graduation. I left it there on the desk. Let the next commander decide its fate. My orders for Joint Special Operations Command arrived that afternoon. The paperwork included an unexpected attachment, a memo from the Army Chief of Staff himself. Asterisk, Major Voss, your work in Burkina Faso has been noted at the highest levels. We expect great things at JSOC. Asterisk. No mention of my father. No reference to the scandal. Just my service, standing alone for the first time. I folded the letter and slipped it into the dossier for my replacement. Let them see what was possible when legacy wasn't inherited, but earned. That evening, I walked the empty parade ground as the sun dipped below the barracks. Somewhere in Colorado, a broken old man stared at concrete walls. In Maryland, my mother tended her garden, the photo of my Pentagon ceremony tucked in her Bible. And here, in the gathering dark, a new lieutenant drilled her platoon, her voice sharp with authority. The past had tried to define me, but I'd written my own damn ending. The final page of my father's military record burned blue at the edges before crumbling to ash in the steel drum behind the Stuttgart motor pool. I watched the last recognizable fragment, the embossed Voss Darius R, from his discharge papers, curl inward like a dying spider. The December wind carried the smoke east, toward the Black Forest, where the pines stood indifferent to the sins of men. I found Larson waiting by my parked sedan, her breath fogging in the cold. She didn't ask about the fire. Just held out a sealed envelope marked with Sox Eagle insignia. Your flight leaves at 0600. Inside were my finalized orders and a single Polaroid, the team in Burkina Faso, Larson grinning beside a stack of captured weapons crates. Someone had scribbled on the border, "Make us proud." The barracks clock struck midnight as I walked the perimeter fence one last time. Somewhere beyond the wire, a drunk private sang off key in German. Somewhere farther still, my father would be lying awake in his Colorado cell, counting the hours until lockdown lifted. But here, now, there was only the crunch of gravel under my boots and the weight of Larson's gaze as she fell into step beside me. "You gonna visit him before you go?" She kicked a pebble, watching it skitter into darkness. I adjusted my grip on the file folder containing my father's final appeal, denied, stamped, and delivered to me by some bureaucratic oversight. "No." She nodded, unsurprised. "You ever wonder what he'd say if he saw you now?" A gust rattled the chain link. I thought of the Polaroid in my pocket, of the JSC orders, of the way privates snapped to attention when I passed. I don't need him to. The wind carried her quiet laugh away as we reached the motor pool. The steel drum had cooled, leaving only a smear of gray where the past had been. Larson tossed something in. Her lieutenant's candidate school acceptance letter, the one her father had mailed back to her in pieces. It caught instantly, the flames licking at her scrawled signature. We watched it burn together, shoulders brushing, the fire painting our faces gold in the pre-dawn dark. When the last ember winked out, Larson shouldered her duffel. "Come on, Major. Your war's waiting." The first birds began to sing as we walked toward the flight line, our shadows stretching long behind us, no longer ghosts, but soldiers. And somewhere in the east, the sun rose. Strength isn't measured by the battles you win, but by the weight you refuse to carry. Some legacies aren't inherited, they're built in the quiet spaces between what was taken and what you chose to become. Walk forward. Don't look back. The best revenge is a life they can't imagine.